Up sound. Do do do. The sound is working. Do do do. Okay. Do we have some camera as well? Yes. Camera, lights, and sound. We need action. Hello. Welcome to this another installment of Rough Science Workshop. My name's Sean. Thank you for joining me. If you are somebody who is now currently locked down, welcome as well. And thank you for enduring the lockdown. We'll all together, we'll get through this. It will be fine. So, what are we going to do today? So today, we're going to look at bouncing eggs. Or more specifically, what we're going to be doing is looking at reactions. Because what we can do is use chemical reactions to turn eggs bouncy. Here's an experiment to start off with. Let's take something to land on. Let's take one egg and let's try bouncing it. Eggs don't bounce. They also don't stay in the plate. So eggs don't bounce. So let's see if we can make an egg bouncy. All right, so here we need to think about chemical reactions because what we're going to use is a little bit of chemistry to remove the outside layer of the egg. If we actually had a diagram of the egg, we'd find that there is the shell on the outside, and then on the inside there's this thin membrane. And then on the inside of that, we've got the egg whites, also known as the album. And then on the inside of that, we have the egg yellows, the yolk, which honestly, if you are going to make an egg white omelette, add the egg yellows. It makes it so much better. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to add something to all of this to react with the shell, to remove the shell and leave everything else behind. The shell is made from calcium carbonate. And calcium carbonate reacts really, really well with vinegar. So let's put everything together. What we need is one jar. We're going to add into this jar our egg, and look, you can't just drop it in there. It's just going to smash and go over the place. So I like to lay the jar down and push the egg down to the bottom like that. And then all we have to do is add our vinegar. And there we go. That's our experiment for today. What we need to do now is just wait for about 12 to 24 hours. So here's something that we can do. We can actually speed up this reaction a little bit. There's something about chemical reactions, you can split them up into different types of reactions. Chemical reactions sometimes produces heat. So if you get two things and you put them together, they start reacting. They might start making gas. They might start doing other things. But they can also produce heat, so you can actually feel warmth coming out of the reaction. Sometimes, though, they require heat from the surroundings. And so instead of producing heat, it's absorbing heat and energy from around it. And so we could actually add some heat and energy to this to see if we can speed up the reaction. If we have a close look at it right now, we can see the reaction taking place. You can see already the egg has got this kind of white kind of layer on it. And if I bring it up nice and close to the camera, you may be able to see these are actually teeny tiny bubbles. Bubbles of gas which are being produced by the reaction. So what we have is vinegar and that calcium carbonate that makes up the eggshell. Inside the vinegar is something called acetic acid, and that reacts with the calcium carbonate, and among other things it produces carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is that gas that we can see on the outside. But it's going pretty slowly. So what we can do is we can speed it up by adding some energy. So for this, let's turn on the kettle and get some hot water. You need something like this, some kind of mixing jug to do the whole thing in. In fact, what we'll do is we'll have one as a control, and we'll do another one as the one that we're going to add the extra energy to, and so we can actually see what the difference is. So while our kettle's boiling, let's add another egg to a jar and put some vinegar in. And away they go. And then into another container. And what we'll do is, I don't want to put this onto a stove and turn on some heat like that. Some hot water will be just fine. If we make it too hot, we'll end up cooking the egg. So always make sure you boil your kettle before you start your live stream. That sounds like it's done. All right. Now that hot water's heating up the jar. It's heating up the jar and the vinegar inside the jar. And in a moment, those bubbles will start to come off a lot quicker off this egg than it is off this egg over here. So when you try this out at home, be very, very careful with the hot water. You can scald yourself quite easily. But you can try this out and actually see how much quicker you can get the reaction happening using the hot water. So we'll leave those to one side. And luckily, I really did do some earlier. And after about 12 or 24 hours, you'll end up with something that looks like this. Here is our egg here. And it's all squishy. All of the eggshell has been eaten away by the vinegar on the outside. And if we just give it a little bit of a bounce, it's not perfect, but I wouldn't exactly want to drop it from a high height, but we now have a bouncy egg. You can actually see through the inside. You can see the yolk just sort of drifting around on the inside of it there. This one here came out a little bit earlier, and you can see that there's still some bits of calcium that are still attached to the shell. But there's the membrane just there. In fact, what we'll have a go now is have a look nice and close at these eggs, as well as an egg that still has its shell on it. Before we get down nice and close and have a look at it through our microscope, what I want to do is just show you a couple of things here. This egg and this one here that we've removed the shell, you'll see that they're different sizes. But trust me, I did actually get this egg out of the same box that this egg came from. But for some reason, when we removed the shell, this egg is now bigger than this one. So what happened? Is it somehow the shell is holding the egg together so it holds it smaller? Well, no, actually it's something that the egg membrane does, which is a quite interesting thing. The egg membrane needs to keep moisture on the inside of it. And so what happens is, if you immerse it in water, you have a process where water actually starts to transfer from the outside into the inside. Our vinegar over here is mostly water, and over time, this thing is absorbing water inside it. And so you end up with the egg being bigger over time than how it started out. This is a process called osmosis. You may have heard that word before, and it means that this membrane here allows water to travel in one direction. In actual fact, there is a way that you could immerse this in something that doesn't have a lot of water, something like corn syrup, and it actually extracts the water out of it. So you would actually see this thing start to reduce inside. The osmosis reaction has ended up reversing in the other direction. So let's have a closer look at these. And for this, what I'm going to do is in a moment switch over to this, but I'll show you what it is first. It's our microscope. So we looked at it yesterday. Like usual microscopes, we've got a lens at one end, but instead of an eyepiece, we've got a place where a camera is sitting. And so it's plugged into my computer. So let's test it out. I'm going to test it on my finger here. So let's see if it's working and see if you can... Yep, there we go. There's my fingerprint. Oh, and also bits of calcium carbonate that I've picked up from touching those eggs. So let's now have a look at the egg that still has its shell. And this is an eggshell, nice and close. You can see there's all these little pits all over it. The eggshell is actually a little bit porous. It allows moisture to travel through it. It's nice and hard so that it protects the growing chicken on the inside. Now, let's have a look at the egg that still had some of its calcium carbonate still on it. So here's a place where most of the calcium carbonate has been eaten away by the vinegar, and you can still see some left behind. And there's the membrane on the other side. If I move right around over here, this is just the membrane by itself. Most of the calcium carbonate's been completely removed. There's still some specks of it here and there. Let's look at the egg that has had the most of it removed. And there's our membrane, completely without the eggshell. And looking at it up nice and close here, it's all sort of, it feels smooth, but to look at it close, it looks pitted. So there we go. There's our how to make a bouncy egg. So, have a go. Give it a go. See if it works. Try it for 12 hours. It might be a bit too cold overnight to do a proper total shell removal. So you might need to leave it for 24 hours. Couple of recommendations though. Recommendation number 1, don't eat the egg once you're done. Eggs, look, they should be kept fresh in the fridge or eaten as soon as you can. What we're doing here is we're actually removing the protections from the egg so that bacteria and other things could potentially get inside there. So don't eat the egg once you're done. Bounce, have a try around with it, maybe even try putting it into a glass of water and seeing how big it might swell up. Maybe even try adding some food coloring to that water to see if the food coloring water ends up being absorbed onto the inside of this egg here. And one other thing you could try is that if you've got some chicken bones laying around, you could do exactly the same experiment, but replace the egg with a chicken bone and see what happens. Make some predictions. Leave it in the jar for a couple of days and see what happens. All right, that was a short one. Today's Rough Science. Tomorrow we're going to be looking at some balancing stuff. So if you have enjoyed joining in and coming to the live stream here today, what I recommend is come along tomorrow, same time, 2:30, and we'll be looking tomorrow at making a balancing bird and looking at what happens when we put things, if we try to change where the center or weight of an object is. So, thank you very much for coming along and seeing us. And once again, we still need some kind of outro theme music. This